And I feel like the other thing, too, one of the things I mentioned on my podcast yesterday is that the comfort level, right, which I call it, that, look, we did QE after we had a major, market crash. We did QE again after we had, the 2008 bubble. We're talking about profound moves lower. Even in 2008, an issue that was, ostensibly a systemic issue, real kind of four-alarm problems. And I feel like now the threshold for a reaction from the central bank or the threshold for a reaction from the government has gotten so sensitive and so low. And perfect, for instance, that I always bring up is this Steve Mnuchin putting out a statement on Christmas Eve this year after the markets pulled back 10%. He was reacting as though there was a massive systemic problem that was going to take the whole thing down on Monday morning if he didn't say something. And I feel like the further along we go, not only are we cranking out all these people that have no clue how the system works and have been riding this wave for the last 10 years, but all we're doing is getting people accustomed to a level of comfort in the market that I think is unhealthy. It doesn't allow them to realize that at some point you do have to.
What you're talking about is people have come to perceive the markets as essentially riskless.
Right.
When you think something has no risk, you behave aggressively, and you don't know how much risk you're actually taking. But they don't. Again, that's how I started out. The central bank and these people, they don't care about that. They don't think about that. They think that what they're doing is brilliant, and they're not doing enough of it. Look, the perversity is because QE cannot be exited, we're back doing it. We're going to be back doing it, and because once you get to where you're doing that and take rates to zero or next to zero, you can't exit it. This is the proof they can't. One of these guys, it was Williams, the New York Fed guy, said low rates were, here to stay, basically. I don't remember what the exact quote was, because they can't raise them. And so rather than people saying, oh, this doesn't work, they're saying, oh, okay, we'll go back to it. And everyone seems to be okay with it. Now we'll see. We don't know how this is all going to play out. At some point, the stock market's going to get taken apart because it's all this false people
bullshit.
Have this sense of calm and everything's fine and they're taking too much risk and everything's okay. And the structure of the market is inherently kind of brittle and prone to the big dislocation, but you have to get enough things to go wrong to get them to start to sell, and then the momentum feeds on itself on the downside. So things will get ugly, I think, sometime in between now and the end of the year, and we'll get a big dislocation. But the Fed is going to fight that tooth and nail. The reason I shut my short fund down in March of 2009 was I knew QE was going to boost the markets, and it would be impossible to make money as a short seller. Now, I never dreamed it would go on this long, and psychology would come to where it is today. But they may fight a decline in the market, but if they continue to monetize and we don't have if they continue to monetize and the economy doesn't get quite weak at some point, or even if the economy does get weak, we're going to get more inflation, and inflation psychology is going to change at some point. And then they're trapped. Then they're trapped because you can't print your way out of problems if people finally get worried about inflation. How would they deal with? How would they deal with? What if inflation? Well, it can't because the CPI is what it is. But what if people began to act as though the CPI was a four handle? What would they do? What would their policy be? You think they could actually tighten and take liquidity out? Look, they couldn't do it over the last year, which is arguably the best year of the last 10 in terms of economic recovery. So the fact that the policies don't work as intended and they can't exit them, again, hasn't mattered. But when it comes to matter, and it will, then they're trapped, and it's going to really be a mess.